Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
This is the Daily Memphian Politics Podcast. I'm Bill Dries. A shorter edition this week to give you a quick roundup of what's happening politically, and back next week with the main event interview. 8 finalists now for the next Memphis Police Director, with Deputy Director Mike Ryle serving as interim police director with the retirement and exit of Michael Rawlings effective April 14th. Mayor Jim Strickland had hoped to take a nominee to the City Council for confirmation at the April 6th council session, but he also left himself some wiggle room, saying he might take a second step and pare the list of 7 finalists from the International Association of Chiefs of Police down to a smaller group and then make his choice. But this is a move that expands the field, with the late addition of Durham, North Carolina Police Chief C.J. Davis, also a veteran of the Atlanta Police Department. During her time in Atlanta, Davis was fired for covering up an investigation of an officer's husband in a child porn investigation. The officer's husband was later indicted. Davis appealed her firing, and a citizen board reinstated her based on inconsistent testimony from one of the detectives working the case. She had been commander of the Atlanta Department's Internal Affairs Unit before the scandal and was demoted from major to lieutenant after she was reinstated. Davis, also one of 3 officers called on the carpet for escorting celebrities around the city during the NBA All-Star Game in 2003. Davis makes 5 finalists for the MPD's top job who come from outside the ranks, and the third to have been fired in a previous position. The MPD has not had a director from outside the ranks for almost 4 decades. Strickland also facing some criticism from MICA, Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope, gathering in I Am a Man Plaza at the outset of the Easter weekend to call on Strickland to broaden the scope of 4 citizen panels who have met with each of the finalists privately. The same panels will meet with Davis as well as Strickland, again, all behind closed doors. The process has also rubbed some city council members the wrong way after they were told by the administration that they can either forward their questions to Council Member Cheyenne Johnson, the only council member on the panels, or save their questions for whoever is nominated by the mayor. More than one council member in the panels would mean the meeting would have to be opened to the public. The administration picked Rawlings with the process also closed because of the use of the Internal Association of Chiefs of Police. The city's ability to do this without releasing a list of names of all who applied was upheld in a court challenge that went to the Tennessee Court of Appeals. Former U.S. Senator Bob Corker at Memphis Rotary Online this past week talking about a public policy reentry probably by this summer. That in a Q&A format conversation with Daily Memphian political columnist Otis Sanford. Asked about pursuing something like the Carter Center by former President Jimmy Carter, Corker indicated he has interest in that and retains an interest in foreign policy issues, specifically in human trafficking issues, although he says he has not looked back at all on his 12 years in the Senate. At one point, Corker told the gathering of about 55 people that he was more burned out than he realized toward the end of his 2 terms in Washington. Beyond that, and well within the realm of retail politics, Corker said he does not know about a possible bid for the presidency in 2024. He did not rule it out. But he acknowledged a different politics than the idea of politicians working primarily on how to solve problems, a politics based on partisan divisions that, he says, for better or worse, voters have chosen. North Memphis activist Carnita Atwater announces she will run for governor next year. Meanwhile, Nashville Congressman Jim Cooper draws a primary challenge from Nashville activist Odessa Kelly in next year's primaries. This appears to be the next chapter after Marquita Bradshaw's upset win in last year's U.S. Senate primaries statewide. Bradshaw, active in the Defense Depot neighborhood's environmental claims, upset James Mackler of Nashville, who appeared to have the Democratic nomination locked up when Bradshaw's activist network kicked in with a bona fide upset. However, that didn't count for much in the general election campaign against Republican Bill Hagerty, who took the Senate seat handily in the statewide general election. Atwater's plan to be given land that the old Firestone plant once stood on for a theme park-type development has morphed over the years into a bid to stop the Memphis 3.0 land use plan that pitted her against Community Development Corporation leaders in every other part of the city. But nevertheless, with a shakeup at the top of the state Democratic Party and an emphasis on local and Tennessee legislative races over statewide contests that most Democratic politicos believe the party is not ready to win, 2022 just could be the year organizers and grassroots figures previously known for issues almost exclusively really get their feet wet with an attempt to mix that with retail politics. Cooper, for his part, says he welcomes being primaried and that competition within the party makes it stronger. A follow-up to our interview last week with State Representative Mark White of Memphis. We focused in that conversation, you'll remember, on his proposal in the legislature that would have set a 6-month, one-time-only realignment of local school districts to realign and take in only those schools within their physical boundaries. This was legislation aimed at the 3 Gs, Germantown elementary, middle, and high schools that are not part of the Germantown Municipal Schools District, but are part of Shelby County Schools. The bill failed in the Senate Education Committee this past week on a 4-5 vote, but it came back to life just minutes later, passing with a 6-3 vote as an amendment to another bill. Republican Senator Brian Kelsey of Germantown voting for it both times, Democratic Senator Ramesh Akbari of Memphis voting against it both times. Shelby County Schools brought in lobbyist Tony Thompson to make the case against the bill on Capitol Hill, his case being the disruption to 3,000 students currently attending the 3 Gs and the 2013 agreement between the two school systems. As expected, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee signing into law the bill for open constitutional gun carry in the state this past week. Back here in Memphis at the corner of Adams and B.B. King downtown, a new marker dedicated by leaders of Rhodes College and Calvary Episcopal Church, marking the location of the slave market owned and operated by Nathan Bedford Forrest that once stood on the southwest corner. The original marker went up in 2018 as the city marked the 50th anniversary of the 1968 sanitation workers' strike and the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It included research by Rhodes students seeking names, ages, and any background available on the slaves sold at the market that at one point collapsed, burying alive several of those held captive there. The marker also was an answer to an earlier 1955 marker just a few yards away that notes the site included Forrest home, but makes no mention that Forrest business was buying and selling people. The 2018 marker was snapped from its pedestal last July, about the same time that another historical marker for the old Antenna Club in Midtown was also damaged in a similar fashion. A follow-up to our Behind the Headlines discussion of a week ago with Memphis Light, Gas, and Water President J.T. Young and Light, Gas, and Water Board President Mitch Graves, the Memphis City Council this past week approved the $520,000 contract between the utility and GDS Associates, the consulting firm that will field a complex set of price and rate quotes and bids on what it would take for Light, Gas, and Water to leave the Tennessee Valley Authority and go with a new electric power provider. The approval of the contract by the council puts the pursuit of these options back on track after 6 months in limbo following the council's rejection of a similar contract this past October. Ashley Cash, the city's Director of Comprehensive Planning, is Mayor Jim Strickland's choice as the city's new Director of Housing and Community Development. She would succeed Paul Young in the position that is the lead agency on several of the city's most critical efforts to change where development takes place. It includes the fairgrounds conversion to Liberty Park and the South City development south of downtown that takes in what was the Foot Homes and Claiborne Homes public housing developments. Cash, best known as the lead on the city's development of Memphis 3.0, the 20-year land use and development outline, the city's first such comprehensive plan since the early 1980s. Cash's nomination goes to the City Council for approval. At the Land Use Control Board this past week, a first step toward a pipeline policy that could or could not affect the Byhalia Connection Pipeline project specifically. That was certainly the immediate motivation for this proposal by Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris. The amendment to the ground rules for such projects would require them to be at least 1,500 feet from homes, schools, churches, parks, and family recreation centers. The amendment goes to the Shelby County Commission and the Memphis City Council as well. And those two bodies are certain to have the same question the Land Use Control Board members had this past week. If approved, would this apply to a pipeline project that has most of the land along its route already secured, but which has not started construction yet? Well, the answer from Josh Whitehead of the Division of Planning and Development is maybe, maybe not for now, with a deeper dive on that question to come. This week on WKNO's Behind the Headlines, City Chief Operating Officer Doug McAllen and Memphis Fire Director Gina Sweat on the local vaccination effort, which now includes no appointment options, the week that a federal effort at the fairgrounds came to town, and dramatically ramping up the scope of the undertaking. You can hear the podcast of that show on our website now. Subscribe to the Daily Memphian at dailymemphian.com. You can subscribe to this podcast and our others at Google Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. I'm Bill Dries. The Daily Memphian Politics Podcast is produced by Kix Patterson.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.